This is Aaron Levine, LG Insurance, with another episode of the And Insurance podcast. And we're doing this virtual style via Zoom. Eric's in New York. I'm in New Jersey. We just made it easy and connected via video because that's what we've been doing for the last 3 years of our lives. And we'll soon get together in person, hopefully, and and take our relationship to a whole nother level. But I had a great time when I was a guest on your show, which is Employment Law Today on TalkRadio.NYC. You can Google search or YouTube search law offices of Eric M Sarver and check out all the great stuff because employment law is exciting. Not really, unless you're getting sued, I guess. Then you're like, oh, I need an employment lawyer now because I screwed something up. We're going to talk about why you need the employment lawyer before you get sued, plus everything else that goes with it. And I mean, Eric, when I was on your show a couple of months ago, I mean, we ran through time like it was nothing, right? We could have kept going for hours and we would have put everybody to sleep. But, this is a subject that I'm passionate about, employee-employer relationships and how it relates to insurance and profit making, right? And something obviously you're very passionate about because you've been practicing employment law for more than 20 years. So you obviously have a ton of experience, and I'm excited to get to know you a little bit further and hear some stories on your side of the table about what's going on with employment law in New York, around our country, and some fun stories to go with it. So Eric, thank you again for joining me. Why don't you take a little bit, give me a 90-second background about you and why you chose to be an employment lawyer.
Sure. Let me just get this little annoying spot on my glasses there that I can see in the mirror button.
We don't edit. There's no editing. We are we're going to record there.
That's okay. We can roll with it. I'm fine with that.
We are human there. So it is what
That's
it is.
Right. Yeah, just kind of roll with it here. Well, first let me just say that, yeah, it was great having you on my show. And you're right, we can talk for hours about this topic, but a little bit about me, as you asked. So I started practicing law in January 1999 and started my firm in 2001. What really drew me to employment law, Aaron, I'd say is just there's very much a people component to that part of the law. It's about human relationships. It's about the employer employees and how they interact. I find there's a human interest story in there behind most employment disputes. Also, the law is so different and changing and growing all the time. It's a constantly evolving field. It's got issues of constitutional law sometimes thrown in involving speech or rights, like we saw with the vaccines last year. So I just found it very interesting. I found it very analytical, and it left room for creativity. So I started my firm practicing employment law, labor law, and business law, and I represent small businesses, medium-sized businesses, and companies. I'm not sure if that was 90 seconds or not, but
I mean, so you talk about, use the word relationships, which is super important, right? Human relationships. It's not usually human resources. It's now human relationships because everything is about relationships in business. But the law is more about how those relationships live in a contract and takes the emotion out of those relationships. But, somehow you have to figure out, the emotion and the feelings that are in those relationships and dig into kind of the why for when things go wrong or how things are created in a business sense for, those interactions that people have on a consistent and regular basis in the workplace.
Absolutely, Aaron. Yeah, it's funny you say that because you're right. The law might state something or a contract might state the employer and the employee's rights, what's expected, what to do. And it does, but there still is that human emotion, I find. There's like that psychology of the employee wanting to feel respected and valued, and the employer wanting to feel trusted. And so you still see, though, these dynamics where even something that should be sometimes cut and dry, like a commission agreement, let's say, that gets drafted, revised for many times over because there's some kind of a trust issue there. So I do see your point, and I also think that it's an important thing to be aware of. Employers need to know the law, but also the fact that they are dealing with other people. As you mentioned, HR is now sort of human relationships more than resources.
Right. So we look at this, right? So if I break your job down and I'm going as simple as I possibly can, you have two roles when it comes to the employment law. One is helping business owners get set up appropriately so that they can manage their employees without getting in trouble.
Yes.
And then on the flip side of that is defending them when something goes awry, whether it's their fault or not their fault, and there's a duty to defend because there's then now a lawsuit.
Exactly. That's right.
Which side do you like better?
I enjoy litigation.
Okay.
I love the fight, the advocacy, but for my client's sake, I feel better when I'm helping them when they come to me early and they say, listen, I've got a new business, or, my brother-in-law runs a company and he just got sued for $100,000. So help me follow the laws here. There's so many. There's federal, state, city, what's going
Right.
on. So I think I prefer doing the compliance work, as you said, proactive. Let's get things set so you can follow the law and run your business and do it well. Because it gives you that satisfaction that my clients are in a good spot.
Right. That makes sense. I kind of feel the same way. So on my side, right, I sell business owners the insurance to protect themselves when things go wrong. But then I like to also help them put their processes in place and put the technology in place to make sure that they are following the law, so to speak. They have their employee handbooks, their operations handbooks, and appropriately set up expectations between the employer and the employee to make sure that working relationship goes as smoothly as possible. Now, I'm just as guilty as many business owners. I don't necessarily have a full contract with all of my employees in place. I should. Whenever I'm doing something, I always want to be protected by a contract, regardless of trust. I just feel like I know better, because when something goes south and there's a problem, I want to already have the rules set up when we liked each other, as opposed to when we don't like each other and we're trying to break a relationship up out of it. So do you help employers set their contracts up for their employees?
Yes, and that's a good point, Aaron, and what you said just now about set things up when everyone's on good terms rather than when things fall apart or there's a fight, and then trying to figure out what was intended and what was promised. So I help employers set up for their employees employment contracts, right? Employment agreements, employee handbooks as well, offer letters. I also help business owners set up contracts with independent contractors and with interns. So a lot of agreements in place. And to your point, you have to make sure that everyone knows what is required of them, what they're supposed to do, what they're entitled to. So you can
Right.
point to the contract when there's a dispute and say, listen, we agreed right here in section 4 that, you can't solicit my customers, right? Oh yeah, I did agree to that, right, for 12 months. And so I do actually help clients a lot with that. And to your point, it's a proactive
Right.
step. Yeah.
I think we need to have an offline conversation, because I need to update some of my own records.
Oh, sure. Happy to
I
help.
don't know if we're doing that one live. I think that one's gonna be behind closed doors, and we're gonna
Yeah, makes sense.
see
Yeah,
what we need to do to clean up my business, because it's
sure.
important, right? I have my insurance in place. I have my own EPLI insurance if I make a mistake, or somebody else on my staff makes a mistake, or there's a third party perception that we did something dubious, right? Like, so I'm protected from an insurance standpoint, but I don't want to pay my deductible and deal with going through the process of going through depositions and potentially into litigation. Like, that's the last thing I want to do. Insurance is great, but I don't want to use it, right? Like, I
Right.
just had to use my automobile insurance. This is a great example. Like, and I
Yeah.
don't like to put in any kind of claims. There was an issue with one of my cars, and I took it into the shop. I said, hey, the GPS isn't working. It probably just needs to be recalibrated. 2 days later, they
Right.
come back to me, Mr. Levine. It looks like somebody spilled a strawberry milkshake on the floor, and it damaged the MBUX unit. And, I'm like, okay, I don't recall anybody spilling anything, but keep going. And then at the end of the day, they're like, it's a $7,500 piece of equipment, and we need to order it. It's going to take
Wow.
2 months to get it. And it's going to be about $3,000 in labor. So I'm like, huh?
Wow.
And that's one where I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to eat that whole thing. Let's figure it out. And, if there was an accident and there was liquid spilled, I can put that through insurance. I'm thankful to have it, pay my deductible, and move on. That's an easy one. I don't want to put a claim in on my EPLI or my errors and omissions or my cyber. Forget about cyber. I don't even want to think about putting in a cyber claim, because that would be the messiest and the most the time-taking effort to get a cyber incident cleaned up because of the amount of notifications required. But that's another podcast episode with somebody else. So tell me a little bit more about some of the defense. What can employers do to keep themselves out of trouble? We talked about contracts. We talked about managing
Mhm.
relationships. Take that to another step. Go one step further on giving that advice out to employers on what they're really supposed to do when they're setting up their businesses, or when they realize that they have
Mhm.
grown the business and need to protect themselves further.
Sure, Aaron, I'm happy to talk about that. If I could just give one brief, quick nod, though, to the importance of insurance, as you mentioned, EPLI, employment insurance. I think a lot of people are under the impression that if they follow all the steps and they set up contracts and they follow the law, that they're therefore 100% airproof, or airtight and litigation proof. And that's never the case. No, somebody can always find a reason to sue. And even if it gets dismissed down the road, as you mentioned, you don't want to spend, tens of thousands of dollars in attorney's fees and all your time to fight it. So you have to have that insurance part. I think that's very important. And I tell that to my clients as well. And in terms of what customers, rather, and clients and employers can do to keep themselves at least in good shape, right? To minimize the risk of being sued. Well, number one, it's important to get with an employment law attorney to really know and understand what the laws are governing everything from your hiring practices to your firing practices to your payment, how you pay your employees. So I think it's important to have someone in your corner. Could be, again, an employment lawyer. Could also be a really high quality HR company as well, outsourced HR, that knows what do you pay for overtime, right? What do you have to pay prevailing wage? What do you do in certain situations where you have employees working, let's say, double time in some industries. So knowing what you owe in terms of payment is important. And number two, knowing the law around hiring practices. Do you have to give, salary transparency like you do in New York City and soon to be in New York State? Do you have to list the minimum, that's a tongue twister, the minimum and maximum salaries in your job you're posting? So I think that, knowing the laws around payment, around discrimination, right? What's considered discrimination, what's not. Having updated employee handbooks, that's a great tool, because employee handbooks that have changes in the law and they say what they're supposed to say can help a company to know what actions to take in certain situations. So, the law on payment, the laws on wages, the laws on discrimination being updated, number one. Number two, having employee handbooks in place. And number three, having an employment law attorney that you can bounce questions off of. All very key.
I mean, that's a phenomenal summary. I like number three the most.
Mm-hmm.
We use a software called through Mineral, Think HR,
Mm-hmm.
that we help people get their employee handbooks done, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's one step, right? That's maybe step 1.5, right? Getting everything else, the contracts, and making sure we're following the operations manual is a whole
Yes.
nother piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
But having that relationship or the ability to dial the 1-800 oh shit hotline
Yes.
is whether it's your
Uh,
cell phone number, your office number, or through a technology provider that has these professionals on staff as well, to just
mhm.
bounce those ideas off of, or the
Right.
concern before things escalate,
Mm-hmm.
is important. I just had a customer of mine. I do a very small piece of his business. Super nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
We've gone back and forth. He's had some issues in the past. He's
Mm-hmm.
canceled. He's rewritten, whatever. Calls me the other day. He's like, Aaron, I had a guy get hurt. This is a
Mm.
workers' comp issue, totally different experience.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't have your workers' comp insurance. I thought you might have had it through another provider, because for the last 3 years, we've only provided you with your business owner's insurance.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, well, what do I do? I'm like, one, how bad is he hurt?
Mm-hmm.
Two, does he have his own health insurance? Three, let's get you your insurance set up right now. And then you just need to go to the kid and try to make a deal before
Yeah.
it escalates to the Department of Labor. And then you get in big trouble for not having workers' compensation insurance for the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
things like that get messy. And if he had somebody in his corner like yourself,
Mm-hmm.
to bounce that idea off of, what do we need to do? Do I just need to pay for this whole injury out of pocket? and have the injured employer sign off on it, pay him, do whatever. I told him, I said, do whatever you can do to
Mm-hmm.
keep it from escalating. Pay
Mm-hmm.
what you have to pay, suck it
Mm-hmm.
up, be a big boy, and let's get insurance in
Mm-hmm.
place moving forward.
Right, learn from the mistake, and hopefully going forward, not have the situation repeat itself,
Right.
Yeah, and you know what? I think a lot of clients will kick themselves when they make a mistake. They get frustrated. They think, oh man, this is going to cost me money. I should have known better. And my point is always, look, you know, very few people, in my opinion, Aaron, I don't know if you've seen this too, there are a few that truly come to you in the super proactive stage before hitting some kind of pain point of their,
Right.
of their own, right? They make a misstep. They pay a fortune to the Department of Labor or to, let's say, an ex-employee to settle a lawsuit, and then they start to get serious about, having employment agreements in place, having the right employee handbooks, knowing what to do the next time somebody alleges discrimination. Do an investigation, talk to the witnesses, talk to the person. Um, See what's happening. Don't just summarily fire the person.
Right.
Wrong move when you're being, told there's some discrimination in the workplace. So, but to your, the people that the importance of having proactive steps, I just can't say enough about it, because once you have, let's say, someone who knows what you should do, the money you spend on insurance, the money you spend on a proactive employment law attorney to help you with compliance, it's a drop in the bucket compared to what you'll spend in litigation in terms of time, energy, money, stress. So I think that's really, important. I mean, I've certainly seen clients come to me with situations where they were not proactive and then they had hit hard in the end. I
Hmm.
had that with a client. In fact, a client ran a small, a small restaurant, and one of the workers was very disgruntled, and he, I think, saw the writing on the wall that he might be fired soon. So what he did was he filed a very disingenuous complaint with OSHA, alleging a
Oh,
certain safety violation, which were not true, and completely discredited, found to be not an issue. But they were wanting to fire this person for a while, and so then the person started coming in late, missing shifts, just very inappropriate behavior. And whenever they were called in the carpet, said, "This is retaliation. You're trying to get back at me for filing the OSHA complaint." So they hired me to come in for the sensitive termination. And
hmm.
before they could actually finish hiring me in terms of a consultation and retainer, I told them, take these 4 steps, and don't make any sudden moves. Assistant manager lost his temper one day, called up the worker at night on the phone, fired him, said, "You're gone, that's it." Told all of the other workers in a group email,
Oh,
CC'd him on the email and
wow.
said, "Don't ever come back here again." Um, didn't land well, didn't sit well, and the timing was about a month after the OSHA complaint,
Wow.
and before the actual finding, discrediting it. So, it was a big mess, and we did settle it. We did manage to negotiate before it got to court. Was able to show that some of the claims they were alleging were other issues were not really happening and would have been dismissed. And so they settled on a fraction what they were asking for.
Sure.
So it was a win for my client. But had they followed certain steps for this termination process, documented his poor behavior, had enough space between the OSHA complaint and the actual termination, and offered a little bit of severance, it could have been a whole different ending. So,
Right.
that point about being proactive, it's really important to, like, whether it's insurance or whether it's just following the law and knowing what to do and what not to do.
Proactive is always less expensive.
Mhm.
Um, but human nature says
Right.
it's not going to happen to me, Eric. I'm not
Yeah.
like that. It's not going to happen to me.
Mhm.
Not in
Oh
my
yeah.
business.
Yeah.
No, it's fine. We're fine. We don't do that around here. But
We're like a family.
you made a good statement, right? You
Mhm.
said the assistant manager did X,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Guess what? The owner of the business has to worry about someone else being stupid.
Yes.
And,
Mm.
and insurance
Right.
covers that also.
Right.
I want to touch, I love that. I love
Yeah.
those kinds of stories. And, I
Uh,
had a similar EPLI claim
mhm.
because an assistant manager did something stupid,
Yeah.
and spoke in an inappropriate way, a very
Mhm.
discriminatory way, and it
Oh,
caused
yeah.
a big,
Mm.
big mess. ACLU got involved, right? So
Mm.
then
Mhm.
it escalated, but when
Mhm.
ACLU gets involved, somebody already knows how to work the system, in my opinion. Um,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
we're not going
Hmm.
to go there. But I
Sure.
wanted to touch on, proactivity is great, but there's
Mhm.
sometimes it's hard to be proactive.
Yes.
When it comes to third party, when it comes to some ADA related potential issues, right? We've seen all the
Mhm.
lawsuits for the website. that websites
Yes.
that aren't ADA compliant. And, I
Mhm.
believe my site, your site is, I'm looking at your
Yep,
website right now.
it
You have
is.
a little blue guy on the side.
Yep.
I
Mhm.
believe I have the same one. It's a simple plugin. So if you're
Not
watching
taking a chance. Mhm. Yep.
this far along, it's a simple plugin for WordPress or whoever's hosting it.
Mhm. Mhm.
You put that button on and it makes your website readable for the visually impaired.
Yep.
I think
Yes.
is super
Mhm.
important because those lawsuits hit the headlines. But other
Mhm.
ADA related issues are hard
Mhm.
to, sometimes, especially if the building is older and it's a
Mhm. Mhm.
place of public accommodation, right? It's hard to kind of navigate that space. How do you help any of your clients proactively with ADA related issues? Do you help getting site surveys? Do you do any
Mhm.
of that work?
I do. And, usually I refer them out to other people. Maybe it's their website designer, developer who has certain software for the, as you mentioned, the visually impaired, even for the audio impaired. There are plugins for that as well, which I have on my site. And, but I definitely do recommend that they have a surveyor come, look at the property. There are ADA compliant consultants, because don't forget, Aaron, you might, we as a fortunate, very graced, able-bodied person, or, I as an able-bodied person might look around and say let's say on a laundromat, look around and say, oh, well, I've got to make a wheelchair accessible ramp and maybe a disabled accessible bathroom. But guess what? If the change machine, is too high to reach, or, if the washer dryer, its folding table is not level and the person can't reach it, or if the website, as you mentioned, is not ADA compliant, you're in a pizza shop and you do takeout and the person can't order takeout on your website, then you can be looking at ADA complaints. So I do actually help my clients get compliant in that regard. And it's a matter of, I tell them what needs to be done. And then I say, I'm not an architect, right? So I
Right.
can't fix, but you should consult this person or that person. So, but definitely it's an important thing. And unfortunately, as you mentioned, some suits have value, or rather have some legitimate component, but others, there are attorneys out there who will scour websites for ones that are off, and will file a suit for someone who's
Right.
disabled, even if the person never really used the service. So you have to be careful about those type of complaints.
Well,
Absolutely.
those are the I call them trolls. I don't know what a
Mhm.
more appropriate term is, but there are trolls
Similar
out there
term, yeah.
trolling the internet for those types of issues. As well
Yeah.
as if you're misusing, images. I actually had gosh, we're
Mhm.
going back 8 or 9 years.
Mhm.
I got a lawyer's letter, some
Mhm.
attorney in Washington State representing a photographer, and you're using this image with the
Mhm.
image number, and it's on this page of your website,
Mhm.
all screenshotted. So I
Mhm.
sent it to my lawyer. I said, one, is this legit?
Yeah.
And what do
Mhm.
we do about it? He said, yes, it's legit.
Yep.
Call them as soon as possible and negotiate to the best
Mhm.
of your ability. I
Mhm.
think the demand was like for 12,000. I think I got out of her for that,
Mhm.
1,000 or
Mhm.
1,500 bucks. I learned my
Yeah.
lesson
Yeah.
for a very small amount of money, right?
Mhm.
And this was
Mhm.
early on when, these types of things. And now I think the demands are even larger because they know everybody's got insurance that could potentially
Mhm.
protect them. But
Yes, yes. And it's a shame, because there are legitimate valid claims out there, and there are, companies that do transgress or transgressions, that and there are good attorneys out there who do represent good people, but there are a lot of bad apples in that bunch that really, ruin it for the rest of them. And to your point, like the Getty image, that's, I think, a very common thing. I think some lawyers will literally go to restaurants door to door and try to gather workers who weren't giving a proper notice, a wage notice that says, when you're hired, you make this much per pay period. I heard of a story once where an attorney actually found a restaurant that did follow the law,
right,
and did actually this, but they had a typo on the wage statement, the wrong address. It was a simple typo. It was a 6 instead of an 8. So the person said, you didn't follow the statute. The statutes says you have to have the correct address for your
wow,
place of business. And I think it was settled before it went to court, before they filed a claim under the New York State law.
right,
But my gosh, can you imagine being a place of business that follows those steps? And that's again where the employment insurance comes in. I come in to negotiate. I come in to argue with the other attorney that this is form over substance. I think the courts will side with us, and they say, does your client want to pay all that money in litigating and take a chance? And we try to settle it for as little as possible. But if I had insurance in my corner, if I was, let's say, a restaurant or, or anyway, a tech company, I'd feel better at least knowing that I'm not shelling out money for my attorney that can't be compensated.
Right.
Hmm.
Right. No, that, it makes total sense. It's all about being proactive and and having a good understanding. And if you watch this podcast episode and you watch the other episode that I did on your show,
Hmm.
you're going to be that much smarter. You're going to be an hour and a half
Yes.
smarter than you were 2 days ago.
And we packed in about 3 hours worth of material in each of those times. So you'd be like 3 or 4 hours smarter than you were,
I got all this
yeah.
great free advice that I didn't get a bill for. So I feel I feel honored, Eric. But so on my side, we are coming
Yeah,
up on time because we try to keep our show under 30 minutes.
sure.
Any other thoughts, comments, or advice that you want to shell out for free
Mm.
on YouTube?
I do. I'd like to first off, just tell employers and business owners, don't lose hope. It's not a bleak message. It's just about, being compliant and taking the proper precautions. So I'd say, again, get with your employment law attorney. If you're in New York State, happy to talk to you. Get my contact information after the show, but make sure you have updated employee handbooks, updated employment contracts. The law is changing around issues of non-competes or what you can and can't put in your employment agreements, right? You can't have certain confidentiality clauses anymore around, let's say, a sexual harassment settlement. So make sure you have the right contracts in place, the right forms. And as you said, Aaron, earlier in the show, you have to have steps in place to follow what your contracts say. You have to make sure that you are actually abiding by, what is required. If you take those steps, if you get with a good HR company, a good employment lawyer, no matter what state you're in, I think you're in a lot better shape. And then you add in the employment, the EPLI insurance in case something goes awry. And I think it greatly reduce your chances of sitting through courtroom, depositions and a court proceeding. So that's my last kind of helpful bit of advice for
Yeah,
business owners, employees out there.
and tacking right on top of that one, right? If
Mhm,
you're compliant and proactive and
mhm.
you've taken these steps, guess what happens to your insurance premium? It goes
I'm
down.
guessing it goes down. Yeah.
Your deductible, it goes down, right? So those proactive steps help you in the long run because the insurance companies don't have to price gouge you because they know you have certain steps in place. And the
Mhm.
insurance there is truly for something that goes grossly awry. Eric Sarver, thank you so much for joining me today. We'll get this episode posted shortly, and I can't wait till the next time we get together. Thanks again.
Aaron Levine, thanks for having me. A pleasure being here, and I wish you an excellent holiday season, and wish everyone else out there a really happy and healthy holiday season too. So, thanks for having me on the show. It was great talking with you today.
Thanks, Eric.